Christina's joining.
Yes, let's see. Here we go.
Hi, how
How
are
are you?
you?
Good to see you.
I am going to go ahead. Good to see you too. I'm going to go ahead and share slides here.
Sure, thanks.
Of course, they updated all of the icons.
Always right before a presentation.
I know. Did you notice that when you
Yeah,
got on? That all of a
yeah.
sudden there was no cam anymore. Now it's start video. I was like, whoa,
And that's
what does
always
that really
how
mean?
it seems to go, right? It's like the moment before.
I
So
know. We have to just demonstrate our flexibility, right? Well, it's nice that we both don't have children crawling all over us or
yes, mine is I think, hopefully napping. So
yes.
I appreciate the 12 p.m. start time.
We do too. And we already have participants joining us on the webinar. As you can see,
Everyone.
it's going to be starting soon. And so we are really ominous out there right today. It's not looking like a happy day here. So
Yeah,
outside at least,
yeah.
which is kind of a shame because we really are counting on the nice weather to be outside more often, right?
I think so, and I think well we'll definitely get into that a bit more as we talk about summer. But yeah, the weather up here hasn't been because I'm out of state now. It hasn't been spectacular. So I'm hoping I'm hoping it's going to clear up.
So we have a bunch of folks here, Ruth and some of our other regulars. Thanks for joining. Can you guys text in the chat, Laura, Sona, if you can hear me? If everybody can hear us okay? Okay, great. Good morning. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Ruth. Luckily, we've been doing this for a long time and we have this awesome Study Pro community. So
Yeah,
I know that I can count. I miss seeing you guys in person. I have to tell you, I woke up this morning thinking, oh, is it going to rain? Because we're so used to having lunch and learns where we actually do serve lunch and we have spectacular presenters like yourself. And so it's sad to not have everybody here in person, of course, but we're glad that they're able to still join with the webinars.
Yeah, and I think it's been working. I think it's still nice to be able to connect with everybody, and just hear everybody's thoughts on everything. So I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Yes, well, we are too. Hi. Okay, so you guys feel free to chat. We're going to start in just about 2 minutes, literally, and feel free to go ahead and chat any thoughts you have along the way. We have people joining. We did send out the link several times. I'm just going to check my email one more time just to see if anybody had questions about how to join, but hopefully the link will.
There we go. Okay, not sure what happened there, but
oh, are you back? Okay.
Yeah.
I just was checking my email really quickly to make sure that everybody seemed to be getting the link. I'm going to send it out to the people that just registered in this last minute, because I know that sometimes they don't always get it, because I send the last one out a few minutes before. So in this last minute, while we're waiting for everybody to join in, I'm going to send the link to make sure that everybody has it that have just registered. It's always such a trick to get it right when to send the emails out to make sure that everybody has the link.
It's so much more, I think, to get to manage and to get set up. it's just we're all learning,
Absolutely. Okay, and it is noon, so I'm gonna I think that's it. I think those are the last folks that have come on.
Sounds good.
Good. So, well, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here, and I know that there will be more and more people joining as we move along. And I will go ahead and introduce, my name is Debbie Rosen, and I am the founder of the Study Pro. And we'll talk about who we are here in a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Christina in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to just share with everybody a little bit about who we are. So we are an executive function and study skills center. If you have not heard about executive functions before the pandemic, I think you have witnessed the lack of all of our executive functions over the last several weeks. I know that the grid at my daughter's school says week 10, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think it's missing a 0 because it feels like week 1000. And it's been really challenging for her. I know that we're not all looking for more and more to do on screens over the next 10 weeks over the summer. But as we'll talk about today, I know Christina and we're all going to look for kind of a healthier diet of what is online. And so that's what we've really been trying to do here at the Study Pro. We have been working day and night. I'm particularly intrigued with what Christina is going to say about about managing our own expectations, because we've been working so hard to really provide enriching opportunities for students over the summer, ones where they are a lot more interactive and they do develop skills. And we have actually rewritten a lot of the work that we've done, the courses and the curriculum, just to make sure that they are really meaningful for kids when we have to find times to find things for them to do that aren't just being on their phone on social media. So that's what we did. All of this information is online under our programs menu. The first item is summer. And I will just mention that we are having next Thursday at 4 o'clock a Rock Your Talk webinar. And that's going to be helping students, and of course parents are really welcome to join because we can all get better at public speaking, but just an hour of kind of a free class, if you will, course, a crash course on how to be a better public speaker. So that is actually on Eventbrite, and I'm going to send something out there soon. And then of course all summer we're going to be doing trying to help make it a little bit easier for kids as they get online next year, or even go back to school next year, in terms of organizing themselves and taking the right kinds of notes and preparing for tests and studying actively, so that it's a little bit easier for all of us. So with that, we do hope you check out the summer courses, because we really want to emphasize the small groups and just, really interactive. And I think those are some things that we've been missing with some of the school we have. So I was thinking that we had the dog picture up here, but maybe I have them both. But anyway, hopefully we said, if you've been to our webinars before, you know that laughter does help the brain relax. So we wanted to share this, that after a week and a half of quarantine, we're ready to admit that those of you who choose to remain childless were in fact correct. We also had another one that, I'm sorry, I thought that I must have put the wrong one up, but it was, I don't know if you can see the little dog mask. Sorry, Christina, I know that one was your choice, but there are some great memes out there right now for COVID. So with that, I do want to go ahead and introduce Christina. I've had we really enjoyed my time working with you, Christina, so far, in terms of planning all this and just hearing. Sometimes I feel like I had my own personal therapy sessions talking about these topics. Christina is a licensed school and clinical psychologist. She was in the DC public schools for many years as a school psychologist, and now for the last 6 years has been with the Ross Center. Most people that know me know that I am very, very open in terms of sharing things, but we are customers of the Ross Center in our family, and we love you guys there. So we're so excited to be doing this. Christine also directs the testing program at the Ross Center, which of course is important for all of us, and is a clinical professor of psychology at GW University. So it comes with just a ton of backing, a lot of experience in different settings. And I know, Christina, that you work with both children and teens and adults. So, really everybody. And so that's really how we got to this place that we're in now. We are in a whole new world. As we started talking and started thinking, gosh, what should we really be focusing on? We started thinking about, we're reading the news on this daily basis, and we're seeing the impact of COVID on mental health. There's this immediate issue where we have this social isolation, which you're talking about today, and then there's a long-term issues of things like the economy. And I know sometimes we talked about in previous webinars the long-term issue of things like kids being nervous about going back to school when we do go back, and other long issues. And we're really concerned about mental health being that second wave of issues. But on the positive side, a lot of celebrities and athletes and everybody are talking about normalizing this, and the whole topic of self-care has come up as something that is something that's really central to what we have to do. And of course, Zoom has become a verb, so we've become a lot more comfortable with technology. So those are some of the things that I know we've seen that brought us here. But what changes have you and your colleagues really seen, and how do you think we got to these particular topics today?
Right. So, I think that this particular presentation really came about organically because we are now about 2.5 months or so into lockdown, and we've all had the opportunity now to see various patients and various populations. And I think something that's really unique and helpful about the way we work at the Raw Center is we have opportunities to collaborate, with our teams of psychiatrists and also our teams of psychologists, and really share, the different trends that we're seeing in the field right now, not just with our patients, but what we're hearing from other professional organizations. And so what we're going to talk about today really seem to be some of the heavy hitters, right? The ones that keep popping up across different age groups, across different populations. And so this really came out of a desire to maybe shed a bit more light on those topics, but also to talk, about some ways that we can concretely support, the concerns that we're hearing in these different areas.
Mhm. Um, well, that's important for us because we don't always have access to such a deep group of experts. So we really appreciate that. And I'm not sure why there was a comment here that we couldn't see the speaker, and I'm not sure why. Can others comment if they can see the speaker? Um, Christina, I do see you on
I,
mine. And other people can see her. Okay, so maybe, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. So for those, if there's anybody that couldn't see the speaker, we all seem to be seeing her. Maybe just try refreshing your screen or logging back on. I should also mention that if you guys do have any trouble, anyone here, thank you so much for all the comments. Um, that if you do have challenges seeing the speaker or hearing us at any time, sometimes it's just temporary. Just go ahead and try refreshing with the little circle up there, or logging back out and logging back in, because sometimes every once in a while you do have those challenges. If you have access to Chrome versus any other of the browsers, that seems to also help. So or also try clicking full screen as Lindsay has shared. So okay, my favorite topic, of course, screen time.
yep.
It's like, all or nothing.
Yeah.
I figured there's three huge options. I don't want to take your thunder, but I will say three huge options we have to help screen time. We can turn the electricity off in our house.
Hmm.
We can move off the grid,
Yeah.
right, and go someplace that has no running water
Hmm.
at all, right, or electricity.
Yep.
Or we could find a time machine and go back to the 18th century, because
Yep.
I think those three seem to be like real cures to our problem about screen time, because of course that's where our kids are doing school, that's where our
Yep.
kids are talking to their friends, that's where the kids were going when they're bored. And so, as we mentioned earlier, how can we move to screen time that promotes more learning and socializing and
Right.
creativity, and kind of change that goal like the diet, instead of having all the carbs and sugar, trying to get to be a little bit more balanced and nutritious. What are your thoughts on that?
Right, and I think that's a really good way to phrase it. I'm getting also to the point where I'm considering, moving off the grid sounds great, to be honest with you, Debbie, right now, but we can't do that. So, the screen time conversation I think has been a particularly interesting one, particularly over the past couple months, especially because even pre-pandemic, pre lockdown. This was a hot topic in our field, right? That was starting to receive a lot of attention. The research was starting to come out. We were starting to see great meta-analyses that had tracked kids over 10, 15 years or so. There were certainly a lot of documentaries like Screenagers and things of that nature. So this was a conversation that we were already having, and we were having it primarily with respect to how we can limit it, or how we can shift it to use it for more positive interactions. And then lockdown
Mhm,
happened. And the way
mhm,
that we interact completely changed overnight for all of us across all age groups. And so the short answer here is that I think that we all need to expect that we're going to be engaging in obviously more screen time usage than ever before. But to also remember that this is temporary, right? One day that this will end, and we will have a different way of interacting.
Mhm.
But for now, to answer your question, there's a couple things that we can do. So prior to the pandemic, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, had some really great guidelines, particularly for screen usage time among younger children. And they were really advocating at that time for really no more than 1 to 2 hours a day, and of that to keep it to quality programming or visiting with family over FaceTime or things of
Mhm.
that nature. And if you take a look at healthykids.org, which is a subset of their association, they've revised their standards, and they revised them pretty rapidly once we found ourselves in this situation. And so really what they're saying now is that, while things like boundaries and continuing to monitor screen time usage is still essential, and having to have conversations around it is still incredibly important, that it is okay to expect that we are all going to be on screens a bit more, and that children of all ages are going to be on screens a bit more. So I was especially interested in some of the revisions I saw for younger children, even though I think this applies across all age groups, which is
Mhm.
that if we're going to be spending more time on screens, particularly for entertainment, or of course if parents are working from home, and need a way to occupy their children just to get 10 minutes of something done, I am certainly falling into this category right now, to be honest with you. I know we kind of joked about that. It's all about monitoring the quality of the screen time. So for
Mhm.
example, if you're able to redirect your young child towards something more educational, PBS Kids is specifically mentioned on that website, something that involves
Mhm.
learning, that is a bit better perhaps than just online gaming or things like that. And also
Mhm.
for older children, I think we're going to talk about this more a little bit later in the presentation when we talk about social isolation. Helping students and your older children to understand that screens are essential right now for interacting with friends, and for being able to socialize. But the way they can do that can also be spent in a more quality way. So, for example,
Mhm.
a lot of my patients are saying that they're spending a lot of times on gaming platforms because they get to play games, but they also get to talk to their friends over those platforms. And I
Mhm.
think that sounds fine in moderation. But we also don't want them to lose that one-to-one connectivity with friends, or that group hangouts or things like that. So also
Mhm.
encouraging your older children to spend time checking in and socializing with their friends in ways that are just them talking. So FaceTime, Zoom, things that don't necessarily have to have this other piece to it, like playing an online game. So I think the
Mhm.
big takeaway here is be okay with the fact that for now we're all going to be on screens a bit more, but that monitoring the quality of that is really going to be the concrete thing that you can do to support yourself and your kids right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's really just
Yeah,
how do we add more vegetables to
yeah,
the
yes.
to the screen time diet? And I've learned a lot from my friends, and I think that the kind of exer games, the idea of exer games or things that requiring exercise, like I know the Wii was really popular a while ago,
Yeah,
obviously things like developing skills. I was actually watching a webinar about how to get your services online, and there was a called Craft Jam, and Craft Jam is a you know probably for younger kids, but like being like you said, like a place where you can go do all of that,
mhm,
more of like skill development. And out school obviously has live classes for that, and learning to code and things like that. And then my daughter's friend had a Zoom sleepover, which was like they
yeah,
could just watch movies together and then eat popcorn, and which is of course screens
yeah,
upon
right.
screens. But they've also done scavenger hunt. And then I did a Google too, and there's some great games out there, um, like 5 Second Rule and Boggle, and things that
Yeah,
you can actually play
yeah,
while you're on screen. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about,
yeah,
and that helps. And I know that Ruth had asked a question about teens, and specifically like how much is too much.
yeah.
And I don't know if you have any particular thoughts, or
Sure.
any thoughts about how do we get them off of those screens. What are you guys suggesting
Right.
when there is too much?
So this is an interesting question and a great question because there is no one particular answer. It really depends on how much you feel that your student is on screens and what your kind of baseline appraisal of the type of interactions they're having is.
Mhm,
So if you're finding that your kiddo is not spending time in what we just described, as being more quality screen time, having conversations with them about let's take some inventory for a day about how you're spending your time and how many hours
mhm,
a day you're spending in what form of screen time. And
mhm,
then helping them to understand, okay, maybe here's a place where we can adjust. Maybe you're spending too much time online gaming and not enough time checking in with friends or family, or like
mhm,
you said, Debbie, playing more interactive games that still promote socialization and social skill building and
mhm,
reciprocity. So I think what we're telling folks is take inventory, get
mhm,
baseline for a day or so, and then especially for our older students, have direct conversations with them. And that also helps foster, a whole bunch of executive functioning skills, right? Self
mhm,
monitoring, planning, organization. There are really opportunities here by having these conversations or through these conversations, not just to address the screen time issue, but to also help foster and develop some other
mhm,
essential skills as well.
mhm,
Certainly, I can answer. We don't want to see kids on screens morning through evening. That to
mhm,
give a more direct answer would feel like too much.
mhm. Yeah, I love the idea of asking them to take inventory, especially when
Yeah.
they're not on their screen, right?
Yeah.
And I do find that my daughter who may be on her screen a lot, I have a 21-year-old and also a
Mhm,
sixth grader. So I do find that they do know they're on the screens too
mhm,
much, but they have a hard time stopping. So sometimes
mhm,
if I'll take my daughter's phone away and I'll
mhm.
say, well, if you'd like to have it back, and she'll say, I don't even want it back. So it is that part I think is really interesting too. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking for over the summer of making zones, like in zone one, which is this
Yes.
time, we're not going to do screens at all. So we just have to figure some other things in. I'm sure they'll go kicking and screaming, but
Yeah.
we'll get through the zones.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
that just leads us perfectly to this idea of, expectation management. That, of course, is about
Yeah.
our expectations of them, but we also have expectations of ourselves. And that, I know everybody here, I'm sure, feels very much like we do that
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it can feel super unproductive in these days. And of course, that
Yeah.
can be frustrating and that can decrease our efficiency and have this lack of motivation. I even seeing it now at the end of the
Mhm.
school year is coming, certainly with our kids,
Yeah.
because they're feeling unproductive in their work and the expectations so high. These kids are asked to do what college
Yeah.
kids are really struggling to do, which is to go online every day and to go through class after class after class. And I think
Yeah.
that's super difficult. So I know, acknowledging that in ourselves and,
Mhm.
you know, in our kids is important. So how can we like pull back and know it's going to be okay? And what are your thoughts really on
Yeah.
expectation management?
So I think this by far to me has been the topic that I have seen as it pertains especially to families and working parents receive so much attention in the media. There have been some wonderful articles in the Washington Post and the New York Times that have been following families, that have provided anecdotal insight into the different ways that families
Mhm,
are managing working from home and watching kids and teaching. And I think we have to actually zoom out here and just remember a couple important things. I think the first thing is that parenting, teaching, and working are three completely different roles that we take on that were not meant to traditionally overlap in any way, shape, or form prior to lockdown. And that there was a reason, right, that we all had things in place
mhm,
like childcare, or our children were in school, or we had made a decision not to homeschool and work from home. And it's
mhm,
because there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so much that you can give to each of those different, areas of your life. And then suddenly
mhm,
overnight, we were thrust into a situation where we were, essentially expected to somehow sort this all out, and by that first
mhm,
Monday, be up and running with all of these things. Um, and I think that was an unreasonable expectation and caused certainly, a spike in anxiety in everyone across the board, kids, teenagers, parents, everybody.
mhm,
And so, the Association of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, the ABCT, put out a really important message at the beginning of this, which I thought was really poignant, and I think gives some insight. And they said, remember, you are not working from home. This is working from home. This is crisis working from home during a pandemic. You are not
mhm,
online schooling or homeschooling. this is crisis schooling during a pandemic. And there
Mhm.
was something very validating for me about seeing that and seeing it early on in this
Mhm.
situation, because it helped me to remember and to then share with my patients that, we are not, this is not going to be a conversation about lowering expectations, which is something that we
Mhm.
all feel guilty about, right? Is lowering expectations. This is about adjusting expectations and celebrating, changing that internal dialogue, right? That negative self talk about what you're not accomplishing into, oh my gosh, let me look at what I did in a day. First of all, everybody's still alive and healthy. And if that's the case,
Mhm.
great, right? And anything
Mhm.
after that is a plus. Were you able to get
Mhm.
some work done? Were you able to support your children in some meaningful way? Did they eat, right? Are they still functional?
Mhm.
These are things that sound, almost like silly to celebrate, right? But these are the types
Mhm.
of things we should be celebrating right now. And so, from a therapeutic side, that's a lot of how we've been approaching this in our sessions is let's shift
Mhm.
this thinking away from what is not getting accomplished and instead really tap into a great sort of cognitive
Mhm.
behavioral therapy mantra, which is
Mhm.
when confronted with a situation that we cannot change, the only thing that we can change is our reaction to it and our appraisal of it. And if you can
Mhm.
start to celebrate the things that you are getting done in a day, that
Mhm.
certainly is going to support you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I know. I think that's those a lot of those comments. I know I really resonated with, and I hope everybody out here does too. I love this concept. Not that I love it, but it really is helpful to hear this concept of crisis schooling because that's how
Yeah.
I feel it is. And I see this comment from Carol
Yeah.
D about the fourth grader expect to function at a level of independence. And I think that's so true. And we're trying to, goes back to the expectation management, we're
Mhm.
trying to fill the gap for them and we're trying to help them and we're trying to, hope that,
Yes.
they're not going to be behind. And I think that a lot of the things we've been talking about throughout these webinars, with Dr. Dalton, obviously now with yourself, is this concept of reframing.
Yes.
We need
Yeah.
to take,
Constant.
yeah, this constant reframing. And I've said this before, so if you have heard it out there, I'll look down at my college son's stuff is all over the place where I used to be able to work out in, in my like escape in the
Yeah.
basement. That was my escape.
Yeah.
And, I really did
No
have
more.
to kind of consciously like reframe not
Mhm.
that long ago and say, you know what, he's here, he's home, he's safe, he's healthy. Not like, oh my gosh, why is
Mhm.
this stuff all over the place? Where like this one place that I get to be. And um, uh, so I think that, and then last time we had this wonderful speaker on gratitude, and I really encourage everybody here to go back and listen to that webinar because that just the idea of turning these things into what I'm grateful for. So every time I'm feeling frustrated, what is the equal and opposite I'm thinking I'm grateful for? I can't go out to dinner, but I am very healthy. I can afford to have food.
Mhm.
This particular thing I had tasted really great, and that makes us much more optimistic. And I think a lot of what you're saying is kind of really leading to that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, so we, of course, have no control over so many things right now, and that's a big challenge for us. We're wondering if we're going to get sick. If one day we're like, okay, we're kind of totally over it. I texted with a friend this morning. She's like, I'm done. I'm getting on a plane. I'm whatever. And so we're feeling that way, and then we're feeling like, oh my gosh, how long was this last? And what does this really mean? And what if I get
Mhm.
sick? And then you read the news about a young child or somebody you know who you can relate to and think, oh my gosh, what if that happens to me? So I think that's
Of
the
course.
what ifs that are kind of piling up on us.
Right.
And the unknowns steal this one thing that we have, which is our control. So,
Right.
what is your advice about how do we kind of take action and regain control in this
Yeah.
environment?
Right. And again, I think you just mentioned something important there too, which is, the fear of the unknown, the fear of how getting sick or how this could potentially impact us. And we're having these conversations, right, with the assumption that we're all fortunate enough to, to stay healthy and to get through these times, right? So working from that perspective, I think we all know like anxiety loves predictability and loves routine and loves certainty, because that's how we avoid spikes in anxiety. But of course, now, as you said, we are in the ultimate, unpredictable situation. And we are all being exposed to how to manage this for the first time in all of our lives across different populations and age groups.
Mhm.
And so, while I think there is a strong desire, and I've seen some wonderful presentations and some wonderful resources about how to structure days, about how to implement routines and organization in the home. That has all been absolutely essential, right? And with the caveat that, you're going to try to do all of that, understanding that on any given day, at any given moment, it could all get thrown out the window. So it's still wonderful to
Mhm.
follow that, but just be aware that things are going to change day to day. I think something I see a lot of my patients struggling with, and quite honestly, just people in my everyday life, is trying to figure out the long term of this. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, this is just one of those times where we have to practice what's called radical acceptance, right? Which means that we are appraising the situation as being here, not looking at it as being overly negative or obviously overly positive, but just accepting it. And that word will come up a
Mhm.
lot in our conversations today. And instead of trying to think long term, trying to think about the short term. So for example, how this could apply to families with children in school right now. A big concern that I'm hearing is, am I going to be going to college in the fall, or if am I going
Mhm.
to be going back to school in the fall? What is that going to look like? And I think while a lot of school systems and colleges have admirably started to come out with some plans, we all know that all of that could change on a dime as we get further into the summer and get more information. So I would
Mhm.
really advise starting to look at your schedule and your routine in more short-term chunks of time. So right now we're going into summer. The school year for kids has either ended or is going to be ending pretty soon. And so starting
Mhm.
to think about how you can plan 2 to 4 weeks out. And then once we're
Mhm.
further into the summer, starting to think about the transition to the school year. So for now,
Mhm.
that might mean thinking about, okay, summer's here. It's clearly going to look different. Maybe there's no camp. Maybe we're not going on vacation, but maybe there are online, online or virtual camps I can enroll my child in, tutoring, things that I
Mhm.
can put in place for them in this 2 to 6 week, more short term, that will give me some more
Mhm.
control and understanding, and give our family a routine about what the next, month or two is going to look like. And then we're
Mhm.
also telling folks, people have been pretty good about having schedules in place, and summer certainly does not
Mhm.
have to be a time to throw all that out the window. I think there's a really good concrete way to loosen some of the expectations and some of the rigidity with the routine that was in place during online schooling, and instead say things
Mhm.
like, okay, we're just going to have small goals, meaning every day, if possible, we're going to have
Mhm.
outdoor time a couple times a week. I want us to all start finding ways to check in with friends and family. Maybe a
Mhm.
couple, every other week or so, we're gonna read a new book. So just finding things
Mhm.
that are practical, that are still novel, that can be implemented, I think is going to go
Mhm.
far. But certainly, right
Mhm.
now, there's an abundance of online, and virtual camps that I think would also be wonderful supplements to the more traditional summers that our kids are used to.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the webinars that we had during this Learning from a Distance series was around executive functions and
Yeah,
talking about, how do we take these
yeah,
schedules and make them more, put the kids kind of more in control because they have what they call preferred activities, right? Which is
yeah, yeah,
maybe screen the things that they want to do. And we
yeah.
want them to do non-preferred activities. So one of the things, we have a blog on our website, and we can share that, but it's, making, how do you make their preferred activities the star of the show, which isn't necessarily meaning that that's the only thing you're doing. But what that does is help relieve them of the anxiety that they're not going to get to that. Okay,
Right.
where in these zones, in these blocks, in these pockets of the
Yeah.
day that you're talking about, um, is the ability to put in this really thing you love. Great, let's put that first, and then
Mhm.
even the
Mhm.
ideas of coming up with all kinds of things you may want to do over these 2 to 4 weeks. And I love that idea
Yeah.
of the 2 to 4 weeks shorter time frame. That relieves my anxiety because I'm such a
Take the pressure
planner. Um, but then just cutting them in strips and putting them into a hat and letting the kids draw one out a day. So there's kind of a surprise activity of the day, or there's something, but
Yeah.
making it fun for them and saying, okay, in zone A, this is zone one, this is what we're doing.
Right.
We're learning to make our own breakfast, and then we're going to go and play some video games or whatever your preferred activity is, and then we'll go do this other stuff. But
Right.
and of course that might sound too perfect to some people or too planned, and but just taking what you can from that,
Yes.
I think is important.
Yes.
And just knowing that the kids sometimes do fight you on the schedules
Yeah.
because they do feel that they're worried about whether, yours is going to take your stuff you want them to do is going to take way too much time. So
Right.
knowing that they have
Right.
that there.
And
But I know it's been hard because I myself normally have everything planned for the summer, and of course now we're all feeling a little bit like it is, we're a little stuck.
yeah,
Um, so shifting gears, of course, just when we need each other the most in
of course.
person. I am such a hugger, and so I miss all of my friends here at Study Pro to be able to hug and to even just spend time with and look and smile. Just when we need each other the most, of course, we have to be apart. So we're probably all feeling, whether we know it or not, some of that, like, effects of that, that disrupted sleep, the
Mhm.
rise in our cortisol levels. Maybe we're a little
Mhm.
crankier than normal. Sometimes we even have like these mild symptoms of PTSD. So,
Yep.
what's some of the advice that you give for like the warm distancing that we're trying to do?
Right. And I think this is certainly, I would say, something that emerges in pretty much all of my sessions these days, and I can speak for my colleagues when I say that I think that they're also seeing a fair amount of this. And it's interesting because it's not always the case that we see, again, like the same sort of themes and issues presenting across multiple populations, multiple age groups, and this is certainly one of them that people are experiencing in one way, shape, or form. So
Hmm.
even if you're in that category of people, like a lot of my teenagers have said, I've kind of been enjoying this break of social pressure and having to check my social media all the time and worrying
Hmm.
about who's out with whom. We're all missing our friends and we're all missing our family. And so I think one of the main things to realize here is that, one, you are not alone. You are not alone if this is affecting you to the point that you're beginning to experience, some symptoms of depression, lethargy, lack of interest in things you would normally do, because of course those things that you could normally do are not necessarily on the table right now. And at the same time, this presents us with a really good opportunity to do some more what we call behavioral activation, which is to take some
Hmm.
responsibility for how we can engage for others meaningfully.
Hmm.
So I would say for all ages, right? Even if you're at home alone, if you're with your family, if you're just with someone else, um, carving out time at least a couple times a week to engage in different types of meaningful social interaction would be essential. So for example, I think it's important that we all have some time to engage in one-to-one, real, connected conversation, meaningful conversation, and check in with our friends right now. That isn't just, a whole big group Zoom chat. There's also a place for that, and that is still absolutely important. And I'm sure you've heard about
Hmm.
like Zoom happy hours and people playing
Hmm.
trivia and kids,
Hmm.
kind of, playing games like we mentioned before, and that's wonderful. But I think to address the more immediate impact of the social isolation, making sure that the quality of the conversation and the interaction is there, and that might mean
Hmm.
putting a schedule in place for yourself, or some sort of checklist that says, this week, did I check in with two friends one to one? Did I check in
Hmm.
with family members? Did I have some sort of group hangout? And then did I play some sort of game? Did I do
Hmm.
something a little bit more fun? And falling into a bit of a routine with that, I think, is going to go far in remedying a lot of the negative impacts of this that we're all experiencing.
Hmm. Um, and hi, Liz. Liz had asked a question on this, which I think we'll take. Which can you address, especially for kids who had a few friends to start with and doesn't really have a way to connect with acquaintances?
Right. So that is a great question, because I can see, how that's going to be a bit harder. So if there are really no opportunities for children to interact with their friends, socialization begins at home, right? And there are different opportunities and ways for kids to socially interact. And that might
Hmm.
mean, if there's a sibling at home, them learning. Again, there's always opportunities here for growth, and it might mean them learning how
Hmm.
to interact with a peer or sibling of a different age, how to share. I've heard a lot of arguments about who's going to watch what movie when and who's going to play what game when between siblings happening. And I see all of these as being opportunities for growth. So
Hmm.
starting at home with ways that you guys can have fun together, and then perhaps
Hmm.
also helping your child to identify, is there anybody that you do want to check in, and that maybe parents can help facilitate, Zoom play dates or Zoom check-ins for their kids.
Hmm.
I've had a bunch of kids who felt a bit shy about reaching out
Hmm.
over Zoom or over FaceTime, because it's not still something that's natural or comes to them instinctively.
Hmm.
And that's a place where you can certainly help your child to set up those types of interactions as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I no, I agree too. I was actually speaking with a friend of mine in this one-to-one that you suggest, and I really agree with that. I think that's so helpful.
Mhm.
I'll just comment that sometimes when you do the Zoom happy hours or things that are like that, it's hard because if you have
Yeah.
5 or 6 people, everybody just has to talk at once, and
Yeah.
it's much more
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
Um, but I did find that with her daughter, she was in the same situation, Liz, that you talk about, and she was able to facilitate, kind of a Zoom code names game. That you can play code names. You both
Mhm.
have to have it, but there's a lot of other games you can Google, games you can play over Zoom, or something fun, or a scavenger hunt where you actually invite some friends and then you have this activity, right, to do
Mhm.
a scavenger. There's all these things online about how to do scavenger hunts over Zoom, and that may make it a little bit more fun and maybe bring the acquaintances a little bit more into the
Yeah.
fold, especially
Yeah.
if you're friends with the parents, because
Yeah.
sometimes we're friends with the parents but we're not as close with the kids. But then if we can have these things, do these things together in a more like structured way almost,
Yeah.
it might make it a little bit easier. So
Right.
um, that I because I know it's hard. I think even even in our circumstance, like you have people that are friends, but then or even acquaintances, then you lose a little bit of touch because
Right.
you haven't talked to them for a while in school in this natural environment where you see them all the time,
Yeah.
and so that definitely makes it challenging. I hope some
Yeah.
of that works out for you, Elizabeth, Liz. Um, Okay, so we're moving on to the next question and keep the next topic, and you guys can feel free to keep asking the questions during this, or we'll move to the Q&A afterward. It looks like we'll have plenty of time for that. There's two kind of funny things here, Christina, that I think you'll like. One is right here on the slide. I've been married 20 years. I'm sitting here with my wife on day 3,200.
Yep.
320, like
Yeah.
32,768. I can't
Yeah.
read, of quarantine. And she's like, I mean, I like you, but not 24/7 quarantine like you.
Yeah.
I think I think my husband and I are figuring all that out.
Mhm.
But there was another thing that I thought was funny. I read this actually just yesterday in, I don't know if it was the New York Times. It says nearly half of men say they do most of the homeschooling. 3% of women agree.
Sounds
And
about right
the
from what
funny
I'm hearing.
the funny part about it was that it wasn't actually a joke. It was true that they
Yeah,
did this
legit.
they did
Yeah.
this survey, and like half the men said they do all this stuff, and then of course 3%. So of course there's different perspectives. We all see it differently, right? But as you said way at the beginning, we all feel like we have 5 different jobs,
Yes.
parents, teachers, running small business or wherever your job is, your real job, I guess maybe call it, housekeeper, chef. And I've been called like principal mommy or lunch lady, like I don't know what hat to put on half the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I always appreciate these webinars because I actually, dry my hair and put on earrings.
Yeah.
And so thank you all who are out here.
Yeah.
So how do you suggest that we kind of get into a better place as families with all
Right.
this?
So I think this is a topic that we could obviously spend just a ton of time exploring. And so I want to just briefly start out by saying that this is a legitimate moment of crisis for a lot of families, right? And we don't want
Mhm.
to underplay that as well. And we never really know what people have going on their end that we're dealing with. And certainly, in our therapy, in our conversations, with my colleagues and with just again just people in my life, we are hearing about upticks in emotional volatility in families, behavioral concerns with kids, um, marital problems, and in certain cases, divorce. So I think that it
Mhm.
just starts out with all of us acknowledging that this is a time of dramatic shift and potential crisis for a lot of our families, whether they be parents or kids. And just kind of having some more empathy for anyone in our life who we know is going through situations like that. And to those families, I would say, you are certainly not alone, and there are absolutely resources at your disposal that you can tap into to support you during this time, whether it be teletherapy on the individual level, on the marital level, or even on the family level. My strong advice would be to not wait, to not hesitate, and to reach out and to get support in place that you need. Now, on the flip side of this, there are some more positive things to be gleaned, right? And there's obviously all these jokes. I love this quote up here. I think we're all feeling that, and I think I would venture so far as to say some people are feeling that way about their kids. So,
Yeah.
everyone, we've never been together this much before, and so I think there are two big things to take away here. Two really, I think, good concrete things we can implement. The first is that, of course, there's been this wonderful focus on we're all together and we have more time together. And at the same
Mhm.
time, we're not used to being in a situation like this. And many of us value our own individual, quiet, reflective time. And if you're in a large
Mhm.
family or, have more than one person, in your house right now, it really might involve having a family meeting and taking time to make sure that you're all getting quality alone time, time to reflect,
Mhm.
time to be mindful, time to think through things that have been on your mind for the day and recharge your battery, because
Mhm.
not all of us can recharge our batteries when we're surrounded by a ton of people. So I would say that would
Mhm.
definitely be one place to start. And the other is, we talk about reframing and we talk about opportunity for growth all the time in this situation. And another is to start to tap into a lot of the different strengths that you as parents have, that your kids have, that you may not have known were there before.
Mhm.
So I'll use the example of one family who I think has done a great job with this, and with some support, has been able to implement family meetings and have conversations about, okay, like, this is how it is, and what roles and responsibilities can we all take on to support each other. And so they found
Mhm.
out, there's somebody in the family who's fantastic with tech. And if, dad's meeting goes down or mom's meeting goes down or little siblings,
Mhm.
online school isn't working, that's going to be the person who's going to help out. There's somebody
Mhm.
else who's been really good about maintaining like a family checklist about, did we check in with grandma? Have we checked in with cousins? Have we checked in with friends?
Mhm.
And who's been setting up and organizing things like that. So I think it's a
Mhm.
great opportunity to sit down together to talk about who is able to contribute in what way and to start trying to
Mhm.
implement that. And I love it too because it teaches kids, again, autonomy, responsibility, planning, and increases their sense of self-efficacy during a time where I think they might be feeling, not so great about other things that are going on in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, and, you know, one of my favorite lines, again, from Dr. Dalton is this idea of watering the seeds,
Yes.
not the weeds,
Yes.
and the idea that there are so many seeds that we sometimes overlook with our,
Mhm.
with our spouses, with our kids, and, to your point of, my husband pulled out his guitar for the first time in a really long time,
Yeah.
and it turns out that my daughter was a little interested. I was kind of hoping my son would be too, but, just um, having them be able to sit there and have the time where he
Yep.
could teach her a few different chords, because there's
Yep.
some great songs you only need three chords,
Yep.
but really recognizing, to your point of what, who's really good at what.
Right.
I do PowerPoints all the time, as you guys
Mhm.
can see, um,
Yeah.
my son was like, boy, it'd be nice for you to teach me how to do better PowerPoints and how to do animation. But just these are small things I never would have thought of, teaching them. And of course, it's more technology, which I wish it wasn't. Um, but anyway, with that, um, I think that's been really helpful as a base, and I'm really hoping that people have some questions that they want to add. I know that we do have a few minutes for Q&A, of course, and there was some questions about any guides to summer resources, volunteer jobs, fun classes. This is a great community. There's a bunch of people on here as participants. So if you guys, I know Lindsay shared some ideas. Of course, we think we have some really great classes that are skill building and creative with um, uh, uh, public speaking as an example, or learning growth mindset and learning study skills. But if you guys have, if any of you out there have ideas to share, please put it in the chat for Stacy. And then Ruth had asked a question, or if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Ruth had asked a question specifically about how to respond to my child when their friends keep these vampire hours and have little or no rules about how much time they're on the computer.
Right.
Um, my child feels like an outliner since we turn off the Wi-Fi at a certain time each night. Can you answer later? Yeah. Okay. So that was the question.
Okay. That is a great question because I think something that we're definitely seeing is that people are approaching the whole kind of being stuck at home thing in different ways. And certain people are monitoring screen time differently, and this of course is going to have a direct impact on how kids can interact with each other and when. So again, just working
Mhm.
from that place of there's opportunities here for kids to learn different skills. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity for a student to learn and practice some assertiveness, where they're able to check in with their friends and share about the fact that they really want to spend time with them, but that the rules in their house are a bit different, and they can't be checking in at 2 or 3 a.m. And can they work towards finding different times of the day to check in, and to also perhaps offer some solutions and or take initiative for planning different types of
Mhm.
hangouts. So I don't think that's going to be a perfect solution because it requires everybody getting on board, and we can't make other kids give up their habits. But certainly it's a great opportunity for a student to exercise some assertiveness, to exercise some sense of planning, and to try
Mhm.
to shift it towards something that's going to work for the whole group to hang out.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Um, so there was another question here. When co-parenting, how do you respond when child has different rules in different houses when it comes to screen
Yes.
time?
So this is
That's a hard one,
yeah,
right?
this is a tough one, and again is going to be nuanced depending on what the different arrangements with different families are. But just to give some general support and insight, if you're in a situation where you're able to have positive co-parenting conversations, this is all always a top-down approach, beginning with parents and
Mhm.
their expectations and rules and things that they want to see play out. So
Mhm.
perhaps even taking it a step back from, okay, what are the rules going to be, and starting by examining what are our goals for our children during this time. Forget
Mhm.
the schedule, the routine. Let's just have a conversation about, as parents, what are our common goals and things that we want for our kids to achieve, to get through this time. And I'm finding that with families having these conversations, they actually have more in common, about things they want to see, being fostered in their children than they think they would. And then that can
Mhm.
lead a bit more organically into a conversation about rules and the importance about keeping things as consistent as possible between homes. And when
Mhm.
that is not possible, because again, that's what I just described as a fairly ideal situation. When that's not possible, having honest conversations about, okay, what is this going to look like at your house? What is this going to look like at my house?
Mhm.
And then sharing that with the kids, and saying, this is going to be part of your routine, is that when you're here, it's going to be a bit different. But when you're here,
Mhm.
this is how it's going to go. And as long as they're able
Mhm.
to predict and understand and respect the rules of each household, that I would say, just to get through the current situation, would be sufficient.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, it's hard when we all have different
Yeah,
approaches. We both parents love their kids, and they want what's best of them. And I think that's hopefully where you can come together, even though we
yeah,
maybe go about how we show that love in different ways or those rules. So, thanks for guys for keeping the online summer ideas coming. When I'll try to collect all of these if we can, and hopefully share them in the resources that we send at the end. There was a specific question about ideas around exercise, especially for early teens. I would even add older teens. Like, how do we get them to exercise more when it just seems like they're almost getting more and more comfortable to stay inside?
right. So that's a good question, and certainly something that again has come up a lot as kids have kind of gotten settled more into the routine of sitting, right? Online
Mhm.
school, socializing with friends, either generally sitting down. I think that this all starts, especially with our older adolescents and teenagers, with conversations about, let's talk together about what some of our goals are for how we're going to get through this, and
Mhm.
and modeling for them, teaching them, about how to reflect on taking care of the different parts of themselves, their physical self, their social self, their intellectual self, their emotional self, and what how how that can play out. And so I think that leads pretty naturally into a conversation about exercise, and starting to move away from, because again, with this age group, we're really starting to work on increasing autonomy, giving them some more sense of
Mhm.
control during a time where they're not feeling any, and asking them for their input about, okay, this is something that we're going to be doing in our house. What are your ideas for what this can look like? Okay, and then how would you
Mhm.
want to go about implementing that or keeping track of that? So I think that there's something about validating their perspective and making them feel like part of the conversation, that's hopefully going to likely draw them in a bit more and make them a bit more receptive to this.
Mhm.
But also,
Mhm.
again, making it clear that this is an expectation that you have for their well-being during this time.
Mhm.
I've had a bunch of kids, like set up their iPhones, like, and shoot hoops together. There are definitely, interactive ways to do that, and maybe making some of
Mhm.
those suggestions might make it a bit more palatable for them as well.
Mhm. Yeah, how can we make that
Exactly.
exercise more fun, if
Mhm,
you will?
mhm.
I know that I was surprised to see that my daughter, who's a dancer, could actually um, dance all together. And now there's groups of them that do still dance all together, even though it's
Mhm.
all on Zoom, not
Yeah,
together, but
yeah, they're dancing.
together separately, right? And so, well, I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but it looks like we have one last question here about, do we have ideas or thoughts about how this is affecting younger kids, like kindergarten or first graders, from an emotional standpoint, and
Mhm.
how we can help articulate when they have anxiety or they're feeling isolated.
Yes.
I know that there was a, Sesame Street
Yeah.
COVID special on
Mhm,
CNN, and I just wanted to mention that.
mhm.
And so that's something that I thought was really cute for the younger kids. But anyway, so we have that, and then it looks like another question came in. One
Sure,
last question, so we'll let you respond to the
sure.
K through one.
Sure. So this is a great question because anxiety is going to manifest differently in different age groups. And so while the hope is, and generally what we see is that in children who are older, and young adults, they're obviously able to process what's going on at a more mature
Mhm,
level, and they're also generally able to articulate and communicate what it is that they're feeling, even if that requires a bit of
mhm,
prompting from you to get it out. But younger children don't
mhm,
always have that ability to say, I am worried because of XYZ. And so a lot of times what we see are shifts in behavior, shifts in sleep, shifts and changes in irritability, sometimes behavioral acting out, because they're not quite sure what to do with all the worry that they're experiencing. So the first thing I would say is just be attuned to if your child is experiencing or exhibiting any symptoms or behaviors that are deviating from what they would normally be showing, and
mhm,
to identify if that's happening. And if it is, and that's what you're noticing, there are ways to share more fact-based, concrete, limited information about the current situation that we're in. And there are, again, the AAP and other organizations have wonderful suggestions for ways to talk to your kids about the current situation, and how to
mhm,
support them. So I would absolutely check out those resources. And
mhm,
if you're implementing some of those things like check-ins and the guided conversations, and you're not seeing an increase, that or an increase, I'm sorry, an improvement in their mood or behavior, that would absolutely
mhm,
be a time to reach out to a mental health professional, to not only
mhm,
get support for your kiddo, but to get some parent management training or some parent support about how to interact and support them during this time.
mhm. We had a great comment from Dr. Felicia Wilson Young, said um, it's a stress of the change. They're seeing regression. Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Young, that through play, we tap into these emotions. Sleep and irritability, been hiding, breathing helps, Sesame and other videos help.
Yeah,
I think the great thing about the younger kids is that they can model what we're doing, right? So
yeah,
as we're sitting there doing our yoga or our breathing, we can make it fun and be like, oh, we
involve them.
can you do what I'm doing, right?
Yep.
And really help them without even know they're being helped, which kind of leads us, I think, to our last question, which is how do we motivate kids to do something educational over the summer,
Yeah.
which, as they get a little bit older is just harder. I know one of the things we talk a lot about, before I turn that to you, Christina, is the idea of choice, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I said to my daughter self-servingly, so this week, do you want to do the public speaking course we're going to do, or would you like to do the writing coaching that we're going to be doing, right? So, or do you want to do the executive function?
Right.
So, and just giving them a little choice, and again, knowing that, taking it back, making sure they know that during those days they also have their preferred activities. So,
Yeah.
do you have any other thoughts about how do we motivate the kids to do
Yeah.
something educational
Yes.
when of course they're going to say no to everything?
Yes, and so I really like your comment about choice, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But just sticking with this theme about involving our older children in these conversations about their well being, and again modeling what that looks like, and being able to talk to them right on a more adult level, um, will perhaps help them feel more personal responsibility. And so again, talking about,
Mhm.
this is not just something I'm asking you to do. There's intention and purpose behind us wanting you to engage in something more educational over the summer, and why do you think that is, and getting their input and thought on it so they can take more ownership for it. And
Mhm.
then I think that leads more organically into a conversation about choice. And doing
Mhm.
something educational can take on a variety of forms, right? It can be an online course. It can be, Debbie, like you said, something that they're able to pick. You can ask them about anything that they're interested in exploring, and help
Mhm.
them, even if it's an extracurricular activity, help them research ways to
Mhm.
get some more exposure to that over the summer. But I really think it involves, with our older kids, talking to them first and providing choice, and with our younger,
Mhm.
children, maybe having some options and saying, okay, I need you to pick one of these, but which one is it going to be, and taking
Mhm.
it from there.
Yeah, and getting them involved in the planning of it, so what
Absolutely.
things are really interesting to you? Do you want to build things? There's some great things now out there for, obviously for building, for learning to draw, for for a lot of that. And in planning and involving them, hey, let's go look online and see things, because obviously that's building the executive function skills. And I
Yep.
think that one other comment as we wrap up here is this idea, again, the theme we talk a lot about, and I know you love, Christina, is this idea of validation, and to really share with our kids about all of this. That
Yeah.
when we validate their emotions, it doesn't mean we agree with them. We're validating that
Mhm.
they don't want to do anything over the summer. I get it. I really get it. I mean, it's been a long school year, and
Yeah.
that is hard. So you know, it doesn't mean that we agree with them or that we think they're right, that they shouldn't do anything.
Right.
Even their behaviors, when their behaviors are off or they're irritable,
Yeah.
and must feel really horrible to be that behind in your schoolwork, right? And
Right.
or that must feel very stressful. Not that we want to tell them they're behind, right? But
Right.
and I
Right.
think a lot of what we're all asking ourselves with this radical acceptance and a lot of these great um, ideas that you shared today is that we all need validation. I hope that everybody that was here, um, felt validated in that a lot of the emotions that you're feeling are real, they're valid,
Mhm.
and they are something that we're trying to get through together. And these types of forums really do help. And so we appreciate everybody being here. Christina, thank you so much.
Thanks, Debbie.
Your knowledge has really just, been so helpful to everybody here. And thank you so much. And I
Thank
hope
you.
everybody took something from today. We'll share those ideas out in the link to the replay. And again, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who's saying thank you.
Yeah.
We really
Thank you,
appreciate your
guys.
comments. Feel free if you have anything else, any ideas. You can send to info@thestudypro.com if you have ideas for other webinars that we could be doing. We hope that you join or your kids join for our public speaking one. And again, to everybody at the Ross Center that helped to contribute, and to you again, Christina, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.